Welcome back to another week of Feathers and Field Goals. I'm your host, Bryce Leslie. I'm here with my two West travelers, now back from the Colorado trip out in Boulder, representing us in person. Dan, Brody. I'll get to Brody first, since Brody was the first to arrive back to the East Coast. Brody, how was the trip for you overall?
Yeah, it was great. I did it through the university, like their travel package, and I think they really nailed the experience. They really made me feel like the money spent on the travel package was worth it. It was great. It was awesome. They did it upright. They had tailgates, they had parties. You got to your hotel room and there was a goodie bag of all like the branded stuff on your bed. It was great. It was amazing. The game was great. The atmosphere was great. I really wish that the cameras cut to the away section because there were a lot of us there, and you wouldn't know by watching the broadcast. But you know, it is what it is. And yeah, it was a great time. The altitude difference is definitely noticeable. I walked up the big steps at Red Rocks, and by the time I was at the end, like my legs were like trembling, which they wouldn't do here.
Wow.
I'm sure.
I'm glad you got a chance to get out to Red Rocks. And I mean, the picture, even though the broadcast didn't show, the picture that you posted of the section got a lot of love on social media. So that was cool to see from that angle. And the second person to just get back a game time decision today with flight, it just got in time. Dan, how was the trip overall for you? I know you got like a week extended from it.
Yeah, it was awesome to be out there, Bryce, and to see Brody out there as well and be part of that section. That was very cool. It was cool. Also, thanks to everybody who said what's up or complimented the podcast or just mentioned it in conversing with us, because that was really cool feedback to get and cool to see people in the flesh who have engaged with it and all that good stuff. So it's funny you mentioned game time decision though, Bryce, because yeah, I'm still feeling it a little bit. I got a little bit under the weather, I think, just from all the running around over the extended number of days and the different atmosphere there, both literally and figuratively. So I'm feeling well enough though. It's good to be back. The first thing I do when I get back to Delaware is start talking Delaware football with you both. So it's a good situation.
Yeah, well, I think we all three of us got caught up in talking before we hit the record button. So I think we finally had to get it and start us off here. And like, thanks for mentioning, Dan. Thanks to those who did say those kind words in person to both of these people sitting next to me right now. And also just want to give a quick one last thank you as well to David Talks Buffs, the DMVR, and Manny from Voice of College Football for Colorado's representative, for all three of them working with us in the past week in preparation. It was a really fun collaboration, and that got me really excited for the rest of the season ahead once we get into Conference USA play with all of the great outlets and networks that are in the roundtable. And yeah, so let's just get into the week here. The Blue Hens, as you know, we covered throughout the week. I'm sure you're here. You know that they dropped their first game of the season in Boulder, falling 31-7 to Colorado. While the scoreboard shows a lopsided result, the 24-point deficit, the game itself had moments where Delaware looked ready to compete with the Buffaloes, with a Power 4 opponent at all levels. A few explosive plays, cutting the lead to 3 before halftime, and a defensive front that showed real bite in the game. But some missed opportunities in the red zone and breakdowns and key moments kept the Hens from staying in it. So I'll start with you, Brody. Just talk about the game a little bit on how they competed and how they missed out on some marks.
I think I've kind of been back and forth on this a couple times because being in the stadium and watching it play out, I felt very confident. I felt great. I knew that even because just because like the scoreboard wasn't kind of indicating it. It felt very even in terms of competition. There was a lot of really great like offensive and defensive line play. Our trenches were very strong. If you listen to any Colorado podcast this week, they'll probably echo the same thing, is that the trenches were very strong. Colorado's run game was not very good against us. Quote, it didn't look like a productive 131 yards. Against a team like Delaware, you should be pushing 200, and they didn't. Because our lines were actually really strong, much stronger than they looked against Delaware State, which you gotta love. We had a couple huge breakout plays from Jake There was one from Jakari Kelly. There was a screen pass out to, I think it was Ellison. Some just impact plays, but there were miscues. And for each big play, there was also a miscue. A couple red zone calls that didn't go our way. Lining up in the gun on 4th and 1 is something that I'll always be vocally against. And then just some special teams mistakes. Just a lot of things kind of added up. And we're not... the game began as a ground war, and then when the last quarterback came in of the 3 who played for Colorado, it turned into a shootout, and that's where it kind of got out of hand, and we're not going to win a shootout with a Big 12 team yet. But I like what I saw. Watching the broadcast made me more upset than being there in the stadium. But either way, I feel like pretty confident in this team moving forward.
Ryan Staub, when he entered the game for the Buffaloes, when you could see their play calling in the first week, and Caden Salter really struggling with the Pat Shurmur offense, and it seems like Ryan Staub is more fit to run a Shedeur Standard style offense that Colorado's been running the past 2 years if they want to call those plays. And I think him coming in, I think it kind of threw off Delaware on that front. They, like we said, best drive of the day, really cut the clock. You're thinking, if they can just stop them, they're taking a 3-point lead in the halftime, and then a big third and 10 play. It really opened up the doors, and they got the 2-minute drill going. They scored and make it 10, and then on a 3rd and 6 moment to start the half, I think 71-yard play to the house there out of the gate. Just you're thinking of a minute and a half like swing there, 14-point swing, and I think I wrote in my article, just thinking about a what-if moment. I'm not even saying if they could have stopped both of those, just thinking if they could have stopped one of them. Even like if you stopped the one before the half, even 3 points per se, you're still down a possession. Just thinking about, how that maybe changes the tone at the start of the second half, or vice versa. If you come out, you get a stop immediately, you get good field position yourselves. So, like you said, really good margin, some big plays, some moments that you wish you won back on both defense, offense, and special teams. There was something on all facets of special teams, on the punt, on the kick. So there's definitely stuff to clean up on the after the second week of the season. Dan, we talked about havoc all season long on the defensive line, and the Delaware State kind of had everything they wanted on the run game. The first game getting 200 yards. The defensive front, against probably one of the biggest, strongest offensive lines they'll face all season, was active. 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. I think PFF had 20 pressures accounted for, 12 of them being quarterback hurries. I think there's 14 members on the defense that put their name in the box score for tackle for loss. The first career sacks for guys like Trey Scott, Caden Singleton, Brandon Gorham, true freshmen. How impressed were you with this defensive front facing a power 4 offensive line?
Yeah, it's one of the takeaways from this game, Bryce, because I think as you looked at it, and you guys just spoke about the turning point late in first half, start of second half that we're all so familiar with, having been there or seeing it on Fox. I think once that turning point had occurred, you saw more and more times the Delaware defense had to spend increasing time on the field and had to spend time on there without so much of a rest or break in the action. And that's what adds up to how impressed I am for this Delaware defensive line. I know, Bryce, you have a segment later on in this program where you'll get to learn more about that from a firsthand point of view, which will be great. But I came away as it's one of the great things to take forward and look into UConn week is how does Delaware's defense kind of have an encore? Because it's hard to say, typically you'd speak about an encore performance after allowing 30 points or more, but there's a short field or two set up there that we can get into if we were recapping this game even more nitty gritty. There's a situation where maybe it's more special teams and offense turning it over on down, setting up field more than it is the Delaware defense alone yielding more than 30 points. So I think that honestly defensively is probably the biggest area to hang your hat on as far as the overall Colorado game impressions on the positive side. And a lot of that, or a majority of that, comes up front, because if Colorado was going to get everything it wanted and more from the QB run game all game, or from north-south traditional tailback game, then It was going to be a very long afternoon earlier on than it really was. It would have turned into non-competitive maybe during the course of the first half, if Colorado was just dictating straight up. So I do think that, yes, defensive front, it's one of those things where it kind of passed the eye test, even though all of a sudden the scoreboard read one thing. It kind of just passed the eye test when you were watching it unfold.
Thinking about the offensive side of the ball, the one scoring drive that they did have on the day started with a Jake Thaw 45-yard pass down the middle of the field, where I think that's where you're going to see his bread and butter all year. He got his fourth third and thaw moment of the year, getting the catch on third down to move the chains. That's something we're going to be tracking on feathers and field goals, hoping that it picks up as the season goes on. But I think that 45-yard completion was not on third down. I believe it was right out of the gate, and then a big screen pass to Jakar Kelly to also move the sticks again, and then Joe Silva really sweeping up the rest of that drive, a pair of 8-yard runs, and then a shuttle pass in the end, falling into the end zone with the offensive line protected really great, finishing out that drive. Brody, I know your thought heading into week 2 was how are they going to get the run game moving, thinking of Silver in week 1, with only 6 carries for 34 yards, and this one 11 carries for 47 yards. Did you think they unlocked him a little bit more, and do you think it helped progress the offense more down the field?
He was breaking off runs. He really was. He didn't get a whole ton of carries. He didn't get as many carries as I'd like to see, but based on what he did get, I really think he did pretty well. He also got involved all of our running backs got involved in the pass game as well, which I think is a big part of the running offense. You saw it last year with Marcus Yarns. I remember that one play at Monmouth where he just goes out for a screen and takes it 86 yards or whatever it was. That same sort of template is going to be in Carty's offense, and that's a big part of the running game as well. Quick passes. And yeah, I think overall, the run game was stronger than I'd seen it before. Of course, you have moments that you're bottled up because Colorado's defensive line is pretty good, but I was also very impressed with how our offensive line handled them and opened up those lanes for our runners.
Yeah, I think both sides of the ball and the trenches really deserve their flowers in it. I think the offensive line held up really well in this one. In my article, I shout out the right side specifically. In their second career starts, Anthony Kachase, again, with a plus 80 pass block score, hit 87.1 in this one. Noah Roshak was the highest graded overall on the right side of the day, and had a couple penalties in week 1, really cleaned it up and looked really solid. I think I was actually impressed with him and his block on that shuttle pass to score on that drive as well.
That shuttle pass is one of those passes that kind of acts like a run.
Yeah. When the Thaw, motioned out all the way to the left side of the screen, maybe setting up a look over there to really open up the middle. I think we've seen that before used by Carty over the past years in the offense. Dan, we have to talk about the quarterback, Nick Minicucci's first start of the 2025 season, getting a full week to work with the ones after spending all fall camp, primarily with the second team offense. Finished the day 18 for 36 with 312 yards, had that shuttle pass for a touchdown, had an interception on the day. Took a little bit to get going, but did make some good throws on the day. Had good reads the whole day, even if the ball was a little too high or just missed in this high altitude. What were your takeaways from Minicucci's first start of the season?
When I assess Nick, Bryce, it really also amounts to assessing the offense as a group, but I'll also get into Nick specifically. I did think that Delaware moved the ball pretty successfully, especially later in the first half. Of course, that scoring drive we've already talked about, but on the day, 19 Delaware first downs compared to 21 for Colorado. So it's not like Delaware didn't possess the ball long enough or didn't go on drives, but finishing drives became a pitfall or a shortcoming. Look at 2 for 10 Delaware on third downs, 1 for 3 on fourth down. So the money downs where you're in that environment, it's pretty hostile. It is a packed house. It's a little bit toasty. It's dry out there because of how high up you are. I think that's part of the reason I got a little bit eventually just under the weather and extra fatigued, not on game day, but then later on was just dehydration. I'm not saying the team wasn't hydrated, but you get what I'm saying is it just really starts adding up as the day goes on, trying to finish drives, trying to finish your offensive momentum with points of some kind we saw Delaware fall short in that respect multiple times throughout the day. But it's not as if I'm putting that all on Nick's shoulders. He took a pretty big hit in his upper body. I thought he was maybe in his head and neck area, was getting crunched between two defenders. And Brody, you could check me on this if you remember it live as well there at Folsom. And to see, it was a play where Nick's helmet had come off, I believe, if I recall, and he had come out for one play. You saw Braden Streeter come in and do an offensive snap. And then Nick Minicucci coming right back in to the game after the mandated one snap off due to the helmet coming off. And the toughness there, I mean, we talked about the physicality in Minicucci's game, from being happy to size up somebody for a block or lower the shoulder to try to run somebody over to get into the end zone. So good to see Nick Minicucci's toughness on display once again, even in the adversity. It's not as if it was a day where he coughed up the football, one interception thrown on a play where he had to get rid of the ball, and he had a player coming for maybe that same head and neck area for all we know. You see Nick, get rid of the ball, and it's one of those where the defense made a play. I'm not trying to write the whole thing off. It is a giveaway that, Delaware never wants to have, but I think all in all, you take care of the ball, you show toughness, you help your team move the sticks at quarterback against that team in Colorado and in that location. What bone do I have to pick? So I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm only setting a low bar, but no, much the opposite. I think there are a good number of things to take away other than just finishing with 7 points total. I think it reinstills a lot more confidence actually in this Delaware offense. Unfortunately, post marker, like in many ways, we just talk about it in a post marker sense. And I think all in all, would have liked to finish more drives, but you come away with the number of highlights from that game in Colorado. You say, okay, there's a template where this is there's a path forward with this Nick Minicucci led offense.
In my last reference to my article, I'm talking about third down conversion rate, 40% honeypot last year for good G6 programs. Some of the P4 got up to 45, 50%. But, looking at Conference USA programs last year, the top four in the standings, Jacksonville State, who won the conference, 41.1%, Liberty, 40.9%, Western Kentucky, 40.5%, Sam Houston, 38.8%. I think 40% is the number that the Blue Ants have to shoot for on the offense side of the ball. Week 1, 62%. Week 2, 20%. Like you said, Dan, really tough environment to play in for the Hens, but they also had an average yard to distance of the first round there at 7.8. So I think, we're going to talk more about next week, but they have to find ways to set themselves up for easier situations from more success on first and second down. That's establishing the run a little bit more. That's, you're just finding ways to get plus yards as much as possible. And, sometimes that 1st and 10 throw, you're setting yourself up for 2nd and 10. That sometimes takes a run out of a play on 2nd and 10. Well, the run's still open, but it limits you if you're not picking up yards on 1st and 2nd down and really setting yourself up for a deep 3rd down. The thing about the game, like we've all kind of covered, the margins just weren't there. They progressed on yards, but they couldn't finish drives. They had they only had 1 3 and out as an offense for the day. They had one where they had a 1st down inside the 10, and then they eventually punted. But they averaged over 6.5 plays and over 41 yards per drive on the day. And you're thinking, that's setting yourself up in that comfortable distance and getting in that field goal range, 41 yards per drive, and just didn't finish on a few of them from missed field goals, stopped on 4th and short, a fumble inside the 10, which we all have our feelings about that. We won't get into that since we have a long show ahead. But yeah, I think we can all agree to wrap this up that week 1, I don't think we felt as good about a 35-17 win as we should have. I think, the score didn't tell the whole tale for that one. I think week 2, 31-7. I don't think we're feeling as bad about a 24-point loss as we normally would feel. I don't think the score tells that complete story as well. So I think they made adjustments from week 1. Still some things to work on as expected, and curious to see how they approach it throughout this week and into Saturday's matchup. But first, Dan, thinking about the trip, you've talked about everything you did. Just a quick round the horn here. What was your favorite play in the stands? Favorite player moment in the stands for the matchup this past weekend?
Favorite play. Now, this is a good one. This is a good weekly pivot point to kind of put me on the spot, make sure I had the recall after I had the plane fog. I've got a little bit of the congestion, the head cold fog. But there's one play that's going to stick out through all of that. And it's tricky because there were a couple X plays that helped spur Delaware's best drives of the day. Jake Thall's moment is very memorable for sure. But I'm going to go with Byron Ellison making a nice catch approaching the sideline. And then I guess it was the far sideline from our vantage point in the building. So I don't want to, and I'll play the video back for myself too, so I don't want to mischaracterize it. But I guess we call it a tiptoe. It was somehow, some way of keeping it in bounds and making more men miss on the way to an explosive yards after the catch. That was pretty big. That was probably Ellison's biggest play of the year so far. So I think that stands out just because it's in that setting. It's a newcomer to the Delaware roster, and it helped, I think, catapult Delaware from within its own territory way upfield.
Yeah, Ellison Jr., he slipped out the left side there as the play developed, caught it, and it just kind of worked his way down 28 yards down the field on that one. I'm going to go a quick shout-out to Ellison before I throw this to Brody. The Sean Wilson 31-yard completion down the middle of the field to the left side. If you were there for the broadcast, they highlighted it, but I'm sure you saw it in the play too. Ellison picked up on the Mike linebacker blitz there, and what a block that he had to let that play develop. And Minicucci doesn't get the time to see that play through and to let Wilson, get to that point in the route for that play to happen. So it's the little things that don't show up in the box score, but it showed up on PFF. I'll tell you that. Ellison had a really, really strong pass blocking score, which is important. That's how you get opportunities, especially on third downs, key passing moments. That's going to be big moving forward for running back that's had a full season in FBS. Brody, what was your favorite play from the day?
I have a couple, and I'm glad that Dan didn't take the Jake Thall catch because that's my one. That's my one seed. It's the one that I showed to my coworkers when I got to work today. They're like, "Did you win?" And we're like, "It's not really about that, but look at this." And then they're like, "Oh, that was nasty," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's really nasty. This guy's really good." So the Jake Thall catch obviously kind of bust that whole drive wide open. The Colorado stadium kind of gets a little bit quieter after that one because it's loud in there, man. But once things don't start to go their way, they do get quiet over there in Boulder. And that was accentuated by the touchdown, the lone touchdown of the day for Delaware. You could hear a pin drop during that kickoff back to Colorado. They were not happy with that, and it started to hit them that this is a real game. And now did it necessarily keep being a real game for them? Not exactly, but it was great to hear them all quiet down and some of them look up at me when I was cheering because I was standing on top of the bleachers with my arms up in the air, hyping everybody else up. And that's why my last two plays, because I've already given two, it has to be a whole bracket. That's my 1 and 2 seed. But my 2 and 3 seed are the one tackle, and I forget who it is. This is why it's my 3 seed. Completely decleated the Colorado player, put him on his back. It was even highlighted on the broadcast. Completely decleated him. That's what RG3 called it. Just like wraps him up, like lifts him in the air and then drops him on his back. It kind of just highlighted that like Delaware's athletes can compete with anybody's athletes. It doesn't matter who you are, you're going to get hit. And then the very last play is 4th and 1 near midfield. Colorado goes for it, and they just get stuffed. They just get completely stuffed by our defensive line and linebackers. And that's a sleeper for best play of the game, I think. That there, like, it's better than any offensive play could be, because in like a high scoring game like college football, more high scoring than the NFL typically, you want to know that you can stop someone on 4th down. It's not a gimme, 4th and 1 halfback draw isn't always going to work against the Delaware defense, and we showed that.
I think that's one of the best feelings, especially, when it's inside the red zone, just knowing that the offense was in plus position and couldn't, see out a high probability, play there just to get the short yardage. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned how it felt in the stands when it really became a game. Even if it didn't end that way, those few moments, you'll be thinking about those few moments for a while. I'm sure that was a really cool moment. One last name I'll shout out. Injuries to the cornerback room, especially to start the year. Corey Lai, Keontae Jenkins, true freshman Jamarian Koligbodi. Started the year, had a few snaps week one. I think had nearly 20, like I think 25 snaps, 28 snaps. Had the third most snaps out of any corner in the room in week two. Got beat on the right side of the field at one moment. Limited it, didn't burst out for six there, but I just want to shout out him. There was a moment on Julian Lewis's first drive after they had a couple first downs that it was a design screen pass on a trip set on the left side. His outside receiver that he was man against was setting up the block, and he recognized this set immediately, broke through the block, and broke up the pass before it even got there. And just been super impressed with him, in his first year in collegiate football, stepping in when needed, when there's injuries, especially a Corey Lyde, who's been great for the Blue Hens in the past couple of years. So I just wanted to give that a shout out. And thinking about the defense, let's stay there. Let's get into our first version of Inside the Huddle, where I had the opportunity to sit down with Kentucky transfer Noah Matthews, defensive end, who has looked really solid in his first two games as a Blue Hen. So we're going to jump into that conversation with Noah and I now. We are here for our first edition of Inside the Huddle, where we'll sit down with a student athlete that represents the university on the field to talk about the season so far and what's ahead. And we get to learn a little bit more about them as well. And I'm honored for our first guest joining us here today being senior defensive end Noah Matthews. Noah, thanks for making the time to sit down with me, and welcome to the show.
Man, I'm honored to be here, man.
Like we were talking about just before this, we had an opportunity to talk during fall camp, and we talked about your time in Kentucky and your homecoming to 302, now playing with your cousin Kayshawn again in the back end of the defense. In this setting, though, let's briefly review it. 3 seasons in the Bluegrass State. You've had starts, a lot of snaps in SEC play. In 2025, why Delaware for you?
Man, I really just wanted to come home, man, be closer to home, be that hometown hero, especially hearing that they were moving up to FBS and that this would be like a special season. I thought it would be a good time to move back home.
Your mother ran track and field at Delaware State. Your uncle played basketball, looking at your bio as well, played basketball at Villanova and then also Delaware State. How much pride do you have in representing your hometown state, the 302, in its first season in a national spotlight like this in FBS?
Man, a whole lot, man. This is a special season moving up to FBS, man. I feel like coming back was the right decision, and I feel like this was just a big move for me.
Speaking of Delaware State, the program's first season in FBS started by hosting the Hornets 2 weeks ago in Delaware Stadium. How was it for you to experience your first game day in Delaware Stadium? Well, I mean, at the collegiate level, I know you've had your experience playing in Bridgeville as well and state championships inside the stadium. But for the, wearing the winged helmets in the blue and gold, how was your first game day for the Hens?
It was special, especially playing my mom's old school. It was really fun, and we talked stuff throughout the week about it.
How did she feel about the move to Delaware? I mean, she has her love for Hornets, but I'm guessing she has love for the Blue Hens as well.
Oh yeah, she loved it. She, out in Kentucky, she couldn't really get to many of my games, but she really loved just being up the street. It's not far, but it's a good enough distance to where I'm still on my own.
Well, winning the opener against your mom's old school and starting the season now, heading up to Colorado last weekend. What, in your opinion, on how has the start of the season been so far for the defense and overall for the team?
I feel like it's been really strong, really strong. I feel like we've been doing what we're supposed to be doing. There's just little things that we need to clean up, but I feel like for the most part, we're firing on all cylinders.
What are those little things that you believe the defensive front, the defense has to clean up 2 games in so far?
It's just small things, mental. That really separates you from being good and great. And Coach talked about that a little bit today. But just small fine tuning details.
You can learn so much about yourselves in fall camp, playing against yourselves every day, but now officially playing against 2 different opponents. What do you feel that you've learned about yourselves in the defensive front so far?
That were dogs. Man, I love playing with my boys, man. I love playing for them, and I feel like we're really strong up front.
5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss last weekend. It came from a lot of different members in the box score. I believe it got up to around 14 members got in the box score.
Hmm.
What does that show for the versatility for? I mean, not just the front three, I would say, but the front seven and even the secondary getting in the backfield and making stops.
It shows that we have depth. It shows that not just one man is running the show, and that everybody can make plays.
Looking at a couple games into the year so far, and your time at Kentucky, you played outside linebacker. Now getting your hands more in the dirt at the defensive end spot. How has that transition been for you? How comfortable do you feel? I know in those positions you still have a lot of the same tasks at hand, setting the edge on the run, getting to the quarterback. But how has it been for you now, kind of shifting mindset in a new position?
It's actually been great, man. I played that position in high school, and that's really my true position. I love playing outside linebacker, and it showed me different things to the defense and different ways to look at things. But I like getting nitty and gritty.
In high school, did you play on both sides of the ball?
Yes,
What did you play on offense?
I played sniffer back, running back, and I also played tight end.
I love it. And any other sports outside of football?
Basketball.
Basketball, forward, I'm guessing.
Yes, yes.
Now, how would you say your basketball game is? Would you say, what type of player do you compare yourself to in the NBA in your high school days?
Mm, Let me think. I played like Scottie Pippen. I was good on defense.
Okay.
I played at the top of the 1-3-1 zone. But that was back when I was more skinnier, and once I started to lift weights, it fell away from me.
The bruiser, I love it. And thinking about, representing the Blue Hens wearing number 13. At Kentucky, you wore number 55. Why 13? Does it have any inner meaning to you?
Uh, well, I was actually born on January 13th, and and
Okay.
so I wore it because of my birthday, and also shout out my boy. He had number 10 already. I couldn't go back to my high school days.
I love it. That's cool. That's cool. January 13th, and now representing your birthday. And Um, let's get some rapid fire questions in here. Get to learn more about yourself as we have already today. And thanks for taking the
Mhm.
time here. But let's step it away from you for a second. In your opinion, in the locker room, who's the funniest teammate?
Mm, James Gilbert.
James Yelbert. Uh,
Yes.
Now, would that be a popular answer you think in the trench mob?
Yes. Within the church mob, yes.
you
Very
know,
popular answer.
Now in the locker room pregame for you, what are you listening to? What's in the playlist?
What should I give you? Oh, I listen to G Herbo some nights, every game, before every game.
All right, I'll have to turn it on after this. I'll have to check it out. We talked about your first game as a Blue Hen in Delaware Stadium. I know we talked about you had the opportunity to play in Tubby Raymond Field for Woodbridge as well. What was your favorite high school memory for the Blue Raiders before becoming a Wildcat and eventually a Blue Hen? Man, you love the color blue just thinking about all your
Yeah,
past
yeah.
studs.
Well, my favorite memory playing in the tub was my freshman year. I played with my quarterback Troy. R.I.P. to him. He died from cancer, but that was a real special year for me. Even though I didn't really play that year, my freshman year, but it was still a special year that year.
No, no, I'm sorry for your loss there, and
Yeah, that's fun.
I'm glad to see you now in the tub representing the Hens. You still have 2 years of eligibility remaining in collegiate football. On the team page, it lists that you're majoring in sociology.
Yes.
If not football, what's your dream job in the field?
Well, I actually like the human mind a lot, so I'll probably be like a therapist or something in that sense. I really like to like see different scenarios within people's lives.
That's awesome. Well, best of luck on the student side of a student athlete this incoming fall and the coming years still in school. Go to meal in Newark. I know you're a hometown native, but what restaurant are you going to the most, and what's the order?
Well, it really depends on what you're talking about. If we're talking breakfast here, we go the original hot bagel. I go
Okay.
there almost every morning, man. I ain't gonna lie.
Now
But
our producer Brody's gonna like to hear that because I'm Newark Deli and Bagel over Hot Bagel, but they're
you
a Hot
are?
Bagel. They're a Hot
You
Bagel.
see, you see, I'm a little split myself. It is good over there, but I think Hot Bagel got it. I think Hot Bagel got it. But
Well,
if we're talking dinner, I actually like this cafe. It's Triple C's Cafe on Main Street. They
Okay.
got good Jamaican food, man. Good.
Okay, Triple C's. I don't think I went there when I was a student, so I'll have to check that out. Breakfast, my
Yeah.
stop was Drip Cafe. I always got the Cali sandwich there. Their
Okay.
coffee's good. That was always my stop. But we'll finish you on a fun one here. We talked about it in the beginning. You talked about it a lot in fall camp. Back with Kayshawn. How has that been for you? 2 games in, you in the front, him in the back end. How has it been really just you talked about it to us earlier a couple months ago. It was a dream come true for you. How has it now that dream has been a reality?
Man, it's been great. It's been a great dream come true, man. We talk about it every game. We pray before every game, man. It's just a blessing to be out there with them and be able to play with them at the D1 collegiate level.
Noah, it's been a blessing to have you here with us today on Feathers and Field Goals. Thank you for your time. Wish you the best of luck on the season, the rest of the year, good health, and yeah, thanks for spending your time with us.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to throw it over to Brody to break us down in the pecking order.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryce. As you know, this is my weekly segment where I go through and power rank Conference USA. It's not an exact ranking. It's not a KF ORD or an SP plus. It's just kind of how I feel. It's backed by data, but it's not exact. Especially as we keep going into the season, it'll become more and more exact. But I like the picture that we have right now, so I'm just going to put that up on the screen. So I'll go from bottom to top. The bottom 2 haven't changed. We have middle at the bottom. They lost to Austin P, and they got crushed by Wisconsin. So they're at the bottom. Then you have Sam Houston, who's the only 0-3 team, I believe, in the country, but I could be wrong about that. There might be a week 0 team that also lost all 3. But they dropped one to Hawaii, and that's tough with the travel and everything. I do sympathize with the Sam Houston burners out there, but you do have to be at 11. You're lucky that you're not at 12. At number 10, we actually have a team that moves down after a win. That's odd. I have New Mexico State here at 10. They beat Tulsa, and that's great, but it's a Tulsa team that lost 9 games last year. So right above them, we actually have a switch here. We have Missouri State taking number 9 from New Mexico State. They get their very first FBS win, and they beat a Marshall team that is almost as upsetting to watch as Tulsa might be this year. They lost almost all their players. They had to forfeit the bowl game that they were in last year because of all the transfers out. But you have to say congratulations to Missouri State on their very first FBS win. Number 8, we have Kennesaw. They're not doing too bad, but the tenacity that they had for Wake wasn't the same tenacity that they had for Indiana. Not that I'm expecting that. I'm not dropping them any lower than 8. Number 7, we have FIU. They kind of moved down here after their loss to Penn State. Again, not that I'm expecting anyone to beat Penn State. I just think I had them a little too highly ranked after destroying their FCS opponent 2 weeks ago. Here you have Delaware. I didn't move them. I just kind of kept them where they were. Kind of like a tale of 2 games. You have the Del State win that you're not very happy with how you played, even though you win. Then you have the Colorado game that you love how you played. Maybe not entirely love how you played, but you show a lot of improvement, even though the scoreboard doesn't reflect that. So I have them here at 6. I didn't move them up or down. I just kept them where they were because I like the improvement, but the scoreboard has to reflect that if you want to move up. And to contradict what the claim I just made, we have Liberty, who lost to Jacksonville State, but I really don't think that there's a 6-team gap between these 2 teams. I thought that Liberty hung in there, but they're just not as good as Jacksonville State at this point in the year. Number 4, we have UTEP. They keep winning. I think that's their only win. Actually, I think they lost to Utah State in week 1. But they looked pretty good against their FCS. And, I mean, as I tend to do, I'm going to rank you a little bit higher if you demolish your FCS. And I might have them too high, and they might come down next week. Who knows? At number 3, we have La Tech, who did against LSU what I wanted FIU to do to Penn State. They really hung in there with them. Kind of the same story as Delaware, where they really hang in to a superior opponent, but they just don't come out on top. It was a real defensive game. They did really well on defense, just couldn't hang on to win. So I think they deserve number 3. Because I like what they also did against their FCS. I'm not moving them any lower than 3. Number 2, we have Jacksonville State, who beat Liberty. They're the only team in the conference win, except for Western. And Western is my number 1. They're going to be my number 1. I think you can make the argument that Western is below Jacksonville State, but I guess that's what conference play is there to decide. So that's my top. That's my pecking order, 1 through 12. And there are like regions here, 1 and 2 could switch. 1, 2, and 3 could even switch once Louisiana Tech gets involved in conference play. 4 through 7 or 8 could all be moved around. And then the bottom 4 are all still kind of there. So that's my pecking order. And then I'm going to transition into rival rundown. And unfortunately, there's not a lot to talk about in Rival Rundown. Not a lot of our rivals played each other, but they all played other people, mostly FCS teams. You had Temple demolish Howard. They've now won their last 2 games by a score like almost 100 to 17. You had James Madison lose a close one to Louisville on the same day that we lost to Colorado. And we have UConn, who lost to Syracuse in an overtime, I believe. And I'm not going to get too deep into that. We've already talked about Liberty, and Penn State plays Villanova this week, if you want to watch that for a little hate watch. Watching Villanova get crushed, I'm sure they are going to get crushed by how they played Maryland last year. But kind of an abridged rival rundown, because we're transitioning into our UConn guest, who will give us more of an indication into this UConn team, which is really better than any like rival rundown could be. So,
Brody, thanks for our little halftime show, pecking order, rival rundown. Super excited about that one. I could give a lot of thoughts, but we have a show to go. I think there were some good moments from the conference that weekend, getting wins against the American, getting wins against the Sun Belt, even Florida International and Louisiana Tech, taking only 10-0 halftime deficits against number 2 and number 3 in the country against Penn State and LSU. So I think we saw the conference as a whole compete a lot over the weekend. And thinking about our rival rundown, we're excited to now jump into, our first version of a rivalry our second version of a rivalry for the 2025 season, thinking of the Route 1 rivalry in week 1. But now I'm super excited to lead us into our conversation with Jared Kotler, host of the CT Scoreboard Podcast, to talk about the Huskies.
And now joining us on Feathers and Field Goals here in UConn Week to give us a greater insight on the Huskies, we welcome in from the CT Scoreboard Podcast, it's Jared Kotler joining us now. And Jared, hey, thank you so much for taking some time out of your night to record with us. This being one of the most, I think, highly anticipated matchups of Delaware's season, a good regional game in the FBS. Now that Delaware's, of course, jumped up to that level, it's one of those non-conference games that we know Delaware fans have been looking forward to. So thank you so much for helping us build up toward it.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be with you guys and excited for this matchup as well. I know it's your first big FBS home game, so I'm sure you guys are going to have a great crowd out there, making it tough on UConn, but I think it's going to be a fun game.
Now, somebody who knows a little bit about Delaware Stadium, and I guess maybe if you don't count the COVID season, Delaware Stadium crowds, it would be Joe Fagnano, UConn's starting quarterback. And in the offseason and then preseason leading up into this year, I was really curious to see, oh, that's Joe Fagnano's name on UConn's roster still from the Nick Charlton days and the Maine connection. Of course, Fagnano, a Maine transfer. And I was thinking to myself, is he going to still be the starter and still eligible here in 25 to be that guy for the Huskies at Delaware? And sure enough, we now lead into the matchup with it being Fagnano versus the Delaware defense. That makes it really the first question on our minds, I think, from a Delaware perspective is, as you look at this, Jared, as you look at this game, UConn, Delaware, does the mutual familiarity between Delaware and UConn's Fagnano benefit one side more than the other, you think? I mean, it just seems like it could be a wash. Could it be a help more to one of the other?
No, I think it's going to be interesting. So, not to go all self-promotion here, but as part of my podcast, I've got Joe on weekly to do a bit of a show with me. And we were talking a little bit about this and bringing up kind of previewing this game and what stands out to him about Delaware. And he's like, well, I've actually been there before. I've played Delaware. And he mentioned how these Delaware matchups were always tough. So I think he has an idea of what to expect a bit going into it. Obviously, the way things have changed going from FCS to FBS, I think should be a little bit interesting, given just some of the difference in the FCS to FBS athletes and kind of some of the depth there, which he brought up, because I did question him a little bit saying, hey, you've made the move from FCS to FBS, going from Maine to UConn. What were kind of some of the biggest challenges that hit you in making that transition? So maybe we have a little bit of an idea of what's going through some of these Delaware players' heads as they're making this jump from FCS to FBS. And he really did mention the depth as a key. So I think that's one thing, if you go to some of these FBS versus FCS matchups, you just look at the sidelines and you see sidelines that, are significantly fuller for the FBS teams. So having some of that depth, and then again, just the speed of the game a little bit, the physicality, the size. So I'm not sure if there's necessarily any advantage having gone up against him, but I think when you're a quarterback leading your team on the road, which is always tough to begin with, when you get to go to a place that you're a little bit more familiar with, you've been there before, you kind of have a little bit of an idea of what to expect. Probably a little bit of a benefit there, but I think, as you mentioned, they're familiar with him, he's familiar with them. So I don't know if it's quite a wash, but it's close to that.
Well, we'll definitely plug in that episode in our description for this. And, I got to listen to it but before we recorded tonight, and a lot of good insight on not just the income matchup ahead, but, the past results against Central Connecticut and Syracuse. And thinking about Joe, while the topic is up, describe the style quarterback he is for the Hens fans that maybe didn't catch him in 2020 and 2021 when he was with Maine against Delaware.
Yeah, I think what you're going to get with Joey, he's a really efficient quarterback. If you look at the stats from these past two games, against Central, he was 18 of 25 for 260. Syracuse, 26, I think it was, for 43 for 259. So you know what you're going to get week in and week out with Joe. And I think what makes this UConn offense really interesting for opponents to plan for is they've got a lot of playmakers that Joe doesn't need to do a whole lot of work. He could just get the ball out, whether it's a short pass to some of these wide receivers like Skylar Bell, who could then just, the next thing you know, turn up the field and it's a 75-yard touchdown. We've seen that this year with a couple of these guys on offense, whether it's some of the running backs he's got with Cam Edwards and Mel Brown, but with some of these receivers, Skylar Bell I mentioned, who was a transfer from Wisconsin, now in his second year at UConn, Shamar Porter, Romello Murphy. He's got guys that can make plays and really make explosive plays. So, I think this UConn offense doesn't necessarily ask a ton of Joe. And in talking with him, he tells me his favorite plays are when he could throw a 3-yard pass to one of these guys and watch them take off and see what they can do. So you'll see a guy who's really consistent and efficient out there. I don't think he has any turnovers to point this season. So that's something you're going to get with him. He knows what he's doing, and he's an experienced guy. He's been there. This is his 7th year of college eligibility, and something that he told me he didn't even know he had this year until the end of last year when someone brought up the idea to him that he might still have some time. So he's a guy who's been in these situations. He's calm and cool under pressure, is something Jim Mora, the head coach, mentioned about him today in his press conference talking about Joe. If you look back at the Syracuse game, UConn was up in that one, lost it late. They were down 3 with about a minute left, and he led them on a minute drive there to kick a field goal to tie that game and send it to overtime. So you're seeing a guy who's cool under pressure. And I think as you look for him again, it's just going to be getting this ball out to his playmakers and really seeing what they can do.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Jared, because when you look at teams that seem like they should be pretty evenly matched, we know UConn is a favorite on the road, and the spread, I think, hitting double digits by a touch. So I guess evenly matched. It depends on the eye of the beholder, right? Like we'll have to see how it all unfolds, but you sometimes do a side by side of these teams, and the head coach, the head coach's level of experience, at least at this level, the QB's level of experience on both sides. And UConn has the more veteran quarterback and more veteran head coach when you really stack it side by side. So I'm glad that you brought that up. It seems like the veteran nature of this team. It leads me into my question for you overall and the team style on defense as well. How has that side of the ball come together too, as we've seen UConn, at least from looking at it from afar, turn the corner more, especially last year?
Yeah. So last year they brought in a new defensive coordinator, Matt Brock, who was at Mississippi State. So anytime you get a chance to get an SEC guy coming your way, usually works out pretty nicely. And he's done a great job with this defense. He brings a 3-3-5 style of defense, which is something very different. You don't necessarily see that all the time. And last year, I think UConn fans were impressed with what he was able to do. And I think this also freed up Jim Mora, because not only was he serving as the head coach before Matt Brock came, but he was serving as the defensive coordinator as well. So a lot on his plate leading up to that. So he comes in on defense. Last year, they had a lot of returners back on defense. So that's been the one kind of question mark on this UConn team this year, was how exactly would this defense gel, bringing so many new pieces together. They didn't show a ton against Central Connecticut, which I think left people questioning just a little bit. I think they had one sack in that game, and you're kind of talking FBS, FCS. You thought, the D-line and these guys would kind of have a little bit of a field day with a little bit more of an undersized line there, and they didn't quite show it. I think part of that might have now been by design a little bit, and not showing everything against Central, because when they came out against Syracuse, it looked like a much different defense who held Syracuse to 6 points throughout, 3.5 quarters of that game, and really did a good job. So you're looking at some of these guys like Omar Diamande. He's a linebacker. The game against Syracuse had 8 tackles and a sack. Damon Brinson had 6 tackles and an interception last week. Cam Chadwick, defensive back there, another guy who had a good game. So you're looking at this defense that's still trying to, I think, put all of the pieces together, get comfortable with this scheme, especially when you start bringing a lot of new pieces into this 3-3-5 defense. It's again a little bit different. So I think that they're getting situated a little bit more. In the jump they made from that Central game to Syracuse was massive in my eyes, at least. You could see a defense that you're like, wow, they stuffed Syracuse on 4th and 1, 4th and 2 a couple times, which they had kind of given up some more explosive runs against Central. So you were worried a little bit. But they started to show what I think their potential looks like. So we'll see what they can do against Delaware. But it seems like they're starting to put the pieces together. And just as they get more of that game time, they'll get that experience and hopefully start to click like they did last year. Because last year, UConn, I think, had like a top 30 defense in certain categories when you look at, getting off the field on third downs there. So excited to see what they'll be able to do as the season goes on.
Jared, when you said 3-3-5, my eyebrows rose, because that is what Delaware defensive coordinator Manny Rojas runs for the program as well. And like you said, it's unique defensive coverage. At the FCS level, a lot of those FCS offenses couldn't pick up, that 3-high safety look, especially, sometimes with how the linebackers sit in coverage. It can be very confusing on, where's the blitz coming from, who's rushing the quarterback in what direction. So maybe it will help both offenses a little bit, and it's going to be different, calls, of course, but that at least like from the pre-snap structure, it might look a little bit similar to what they saw in fall camp. You mentioned Jim Mora a couple times. Let's talk about him, especially I'm sure a lot of listeners know who Jim Mora is, and as a Falcons fan, I'm familiar with him in the past. Really strong at UCLA, at least in the first half of his tenure at UCLA, but in year 4 now with the Huskies, and 2024 was where he really, his vision for the program really was shown to light. Going 9-4 with a win in the Fenway Bowl against North Carolina. And talk about what he has done for the program in his first few years and how he's really built it up.
Yeah, I think with what you've seen, what Jim Moore has done is he's come in there and really had to completely change the culture and direction of this program. I mean, I'm sure you guys know just from looking at afar, UConn had kind of been a punching bag in the doormat for a lot of FBS teams when they played them, even some FCS teams losing to Holy Cross under Randy Edsall in his last year before Jim Mora came. But you look at what Jim Mora has done, and it's really is nothing short of remarkable. His first year there takes him to a bowl game 6-6, beats a top 25 Liberty team. Everyone gets really excited, starts to see what he's got. Year two, a little bit of a step back, going 3-9. They lost some 50-50 games the year before that they had won. So things just kind of evened out a little bit. But last year, you really saw the vision for what Jim Morris wanted to do with this team. The independent schedule has given them a nice mix of challenges where they get to go up against some Power 4 teams, but also having a nice mix of FBS teams that are at their level or maybe a little bit lower compared to where they are when you look at some of these rankings. So they put together a really nice year last year. Things really started to click both offensively and defensively. And I think one thing that was big about year three is UConn and the program really started to make more of an investment in NIL. So you started to see Jim Mora, who maybe in the earlier days here at UConn wasn't quite sure how to necessarily take advantage of the transfer portal given some of the NIL limitations they might have had on the football side of things. But they've really stepped up the amount of investment in NIL for football. So you're starting to see that, I think, these past couple of years here where that investment is paying off. But to go through last year, they played 3 ACC teams really close. Lost, I think, by 5 to Duke on the road. Lost by a touchdown to Syracuse and lost by 3 to Wake at home. If you go back and look at that game, a call that Jim Mora was not happy about at the end of the game. But they couldn't quite get over the hump against those ACC teams, but then pulled one off against North Carolina in the Fenway Bowl, kind of showing that UConn football really is here to stay a little bit and kind of show their fight a little bit, because this was a program. And I know Delaware is going through this jump from FCS to FBS. UConn wasn't doing that all too long ago. When you look at it in the early 2000s, in what Randy Edsall was able to build, getting them to a Fiesta Bowl, then unfortunately just really had a decline over the past 10 years or so. But Jim Mora is getting them back on that path. The first winning season last year was the first winning season since 2010. So you go back quite a bit. Over a decade there to see that. So it was really exciting to see what Jim Mora has been able to do this program. He's just the kind of the consummate professional out there. He comes from a football family. His dad, got the famous playoffs rant. Jim also brings that same enthusiasm to the program. I've talked with him a bunch for the podcast as well. And he's a down to earth guy. Eats, sleeps, breathes football. One thing that's kind of interesting, he's brought on some former players now who are working on the coaching staff, and they're actually living in his house with him and his wife right now. So you talk about a guy that's dedicated to the football program. Not sure what my wife would say if I said, "Hey, let's move in 3 former players to that are going to join the coaching staff to live with us in the time being." But he's a guy who's truly just kind of committed himself later on in his career here. I think he saw UConn as a chance to really show his football chops and show what he could do, because the way things ended at UCLA probably weren't the way he wanted to see them end. So it's kind of been a rebuilding process for him and taking his career to really show what he can do. And I know UConn fans are thrilled with the job he's done.
Yeah, more as you mentioned, big football background history, and from the Delaware aspect of things, week 1 got to face Deshaun Jackson for his head coaching career from his great NFL career as a wide receiver for both Philadelphia and Washington, and then week 2 getting to face Deion Sanders, Coach Prime out there, and now week 3 facing Jim Mora. So in that aspect, it's been very interesting to see the Blue Hens face very prestigious names in the game in both college and the NFL. So Jared, thanks so much for your time, sitting down with us, looking into the Huskies and the Blue Hens heading into week 3, a big rivalry match, like you said, haven't been able to face since 1998. So I know both fan bases are excited to hopefully renew this rivalry, face off in 2025 before in a couple of years heading back up to Connecticut, facing off again. Just want to give you a chance to plug, where our listeners can find you and your work.
Yeah, thanks. So It's the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. On YouTube, we've got so a bunch of great content out there around UConn football, UConn basketball, some other Connecticut sports teams here. We got a bunch of other colleges and universities here in the state covering that. If you're on social, at CT Scoreboard Pod, wherever you're looking at socials, Twitter, Instagram, we've got you covered. So I appreciate the chance getting to come on, talk a little UConn football. Always fun to do that, and excited for this matchup on Saturday.
Yeah, we'll definitely look for Jared's work. He does great stuff. Go listen to his interviews with both Jim Mora and the quarterback before they kick things off. So, Jared, thanks again for your time with us this evening.
You got it. Thanks so much.
Super fun conversation with Jared to talk about the Huskies leading into this Week 3 matchup on Saturday afternoon, finally back in Delaware Stadium. Super excited for that. You can find Jared personally at Jared Kotler on X. You can find his podcast on all platforms, a CT Scoreboard Podcast. You can find him on X at CT Scoreboard Pod. Let's jump into what we're looking for now on the Blue Hen side of things. We got a little bit about the Huskies. We talked about how the Blue Hens have looked in Week 1, specifically Week 2 against Colorado. Dan, what are you keying in on for the Hens in this matchup where they are? It's probably one of the first times I've seen Delaware an underdog this big in quite some time. I think we were talking about this. Maybe that North Dakota State game in 2019 was the last time I don't even know what the spread was in that game, but it feels like a game that was probably the last since one like this.
Yeah, Bryce, I'm right there with you. You think back to some other Delaware home games against opponents who might be favored over the Blue Hens, even at Delaware Stadium. You think, heck, there are years Villanova was probably a favorite, maybe more recently than 19 against Delaware and Newark. I think about like some of those JMU games, JMU playing at Delaware. Would have been favored a couple of times in the more recent series history. I just don't remember off the top of my head what the spreads would have been and the margins would have been. But anyhow, this is one of those feelings where Delaware is a home dog, and it means a lot, of course, to Coach Carty and the rest of the program at Delaware to protect home turf. So what I'm looking forward to in seeing how Delaware is able to accomplish that against UConn is it goes back to a takeaway from Colorado. The situational football cliche as represented in 3rd and 4th down, money down conversions. Because I do think that there's enough inspiration we can see on offense to keep the chains moving against UConn. I think Delaware will move the ball to some extent, but how many drives are finished with points? How many drives is Delaware cashing in on? That's obviously sounds like such simple quote analysis because it's the name of the game, but there are going to be those moments where Delaware is playing from behind, perhaps already at home. Delaware last season, maybe with a bunch of this roster still intact, didn't have to come from behind a lot at home. Just maybe because of strength of schedule or just how Delaware is able to assert itself in home games. There'll be some of that home game pressure here, I think, against UConn, where Delaware is going to need more than anything to try to make it a one-score game again or something like that, and need nothing more than to get a 3rd down to drive deeper into UConn territory. So I think that I'm looking forward to how Delaware puts itself in a position to convert on 3rds and 4ths. We know Delaware will probably wind up in a situation where it's going for it at least once on 4th down offensively, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the nature of the I don't want to say the game plan, but the way the game is called, and I think properly called by Coach Carty. We haven't seen him veer from that, right? Like it's part of the program identity. Your program's identity is not an identity unless you actually stick to it, even when the going is tough. So I'm not against the 4th down attempts, but and I do think Delaware on average will look better in that category against UConn. But I'll also shoehorn in real quickly another facet. And what I'm looking for is the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half, because even aside from the Colorado game experience, you hear a lot mentioned about last 4, first 4, and how those middle 8 minutes or the middle 8 can really swing the game one direction or another and kind of do it for good, because it can sort of not dictate, nothing is dictated or guaranteed, but it can sort of send the game in a certain direction that can be hard to course correct if it's going against you, if it's not going your way. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what Delaware does, not just at a baseline level where at a baseline, is Delaware hitting its averages of yards of offense, and is it wrapping up even better than it did against Del State in Colorado? I mean, that's one baseline, but in order to get over the top as an underdog now again this week, it's the situational stuff. It's the cliche stuff that gets oversaid until it gets pointed out that you didn't do enough. So that's why I'm looking that direction.
You made a lot of great points, and the middle eight is something that is important that we haven't really talked about yet in our shows this season. And I mean, it definitely showed itself in week 2, and I'm really glad you pointed that out. And definitely something that if you're going to be in a tight matchup, it's all about the margins. That's a big margin that's doesn't show up in the box score. There's no middle 8-minute time of possession or point differential stats. So little things like that are important. Brody, you just were an opposing fan in the stadium supporting the Hens. Now back in Delaware Stadium, what are you looking out for in week 3 against the Huskies?
I'm looking for the stadium atmosphere. I'm looking for the UD faithful to come in and come loud. I was at Colorado, and I was like standing up on my bleachers and I was yelling. I was like, y'all didn't come all this way to be quiet now. Y'all didn't come all this way not to yell, not to scream, right? And the Colorado fans were looking me down like I was doing something wrong. And that's exactly what we need to bring to UConn. I think a lot of people even people who have been checked out of the program for a while, are going to come and see this game. This UConn game is important. Even the UConn podcasts that I've heard have talked about how this game is important. A couple of them were accusing us of throwing batteries and dumping water on people's heads, like we're Eagles fans, and a lot of us are Eagles fans. But that's the kind of tenacity, batteries or not, that I want to see people bring to this game. It's gonna have to be loud. We have to throw UConn off of their game. A couple false start penalties, a couple defensive neutral zone infraction penalties can really add up to kind of get this place to where it needs to go, get this team where it needs to go, kind of skew the atmosphere into Delaware's favor.
I think that's a good point. The Blue Hens' first home game of the season was lost a lot of its capacity when that rain came towards right at the halftime point. That middle part of that middle 8 minutes that we've just talked about. So I think that's important. The last time these two programs have faced off was the end of its rivalry before any of the three of us were here in 1998, and it's batteries or not. I hope the Blue Hens faithful really brings it on Saturday. Something that I'm really keying in on for the Hens, and it's something that I think Dan touched on last week for his thought for the Colorado game. I went back and forth, wanted to talk about. We talked a lot about the defensive front, so I'm going to think about this on the turnover margin. When you're in a close battle like this, you have to find ways to set yourself up for field position, turn the ball over, keep your defense off the field. And a good way to keep the defense off the field is the offense taking care of the ball and the defense taking the ball away. So I think the turnover battle is going to be something to watch. We've talked about it in the Ryan Carty era, 20-0 when winning the turnover battle in a game, and did not win it week 2, won it in week 1, and that's how it reflects the season so far. Looking over on the other side of the ball, we're very familiar with the quarterback, Joe Fagano from Maine in his days and 7th year of college football. The Connecticut offense has not turned the ball over once yet in either game this season. So finding a way to take the ball away from them. Cam Edwards, Mel Brown out of the backfield, Skylar Bell, at receiver, they have some big time playmakers, and I think it's going to be important to try to get the ball out as much as they can, really. Just trying to find ways to maximize time of possession, maximize amount of possessions, and limiting the amount of time the defense is on the field. So I think we all made some great points, and I think that kind of solves the margins itself. The time, the turnover battle, the third down success rate, and how the home crowd is really going to use its advantage. Think about scores now. Dan, we're going to go in the same order as always. You're always setting the tone for us. What's your score for week 3?
Thanks, Bryce. And following up quickly on your point there, I think Delaware's offense lends itself to winning the turnover battle. If Delaware's offense is clicking, we're talking about Carty and other, Sean Goldrich coached QBs who are making good decisions, and there are enough X plays where Delaware's not even accruing enough total snaps to have as many risks of turning it over. Carty has implied from time to time that every time you snap the ball, the more times you have to snap it per drive, there's a greater chance of something bad happening. Just on off kilter or a fluky play or just bad execution. So I do think Delaware's offense does lend itself to winning the turnover battle, independent of what the defense does. But to getting to a score against UConn, I like Delaware to bounce back this week. I do like Delaware to respond. It'll be important to see how Delaware looks physically this week, just in bouncing back. I mean, I've been talking about myself that nobody should really care about or too much to know. I'm not trying to overdo it, but like, even I'm not the one who was out there on the field, and you can still kind of just feel just the transition of getting back into Eastern time and all those kinds of things. This is an earlier time of year than usual for Delaware to be making a switch of time zones. Of course, it's going to happen regularly now, but anyway, you just look for those fundamentals to be set in terms of transitioning back to a home game and back to Eastern time. I look for Delaware, though, like I said, to get the win and bounce back. I'm going to go with Delaware. It's going to be tight. Delaware is not going to get this one, of course, easily. I'm going to go with Delaware by a field goal by the final of 27-24.
See, this is why I'm glad you set the tone, because similar scoreline that I'm feeling. I do like this to be a close battle. Both teams really didn't win in the margins when it came down to it. Delaware having an opportunity to make that game in week 2. UConn 17-6 lead with 4 or 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter on the road at Syracuse, and just did not capitalize on that. It ended up losing in overtime to Syracuse. I think it's going to come down to who can take care of the ball and who can maximize the opportunities, because I do see it being really close. I see it coming down the last possession of the game. I think maybe Connecticut's one step ahead of Delaware so far in this season. I'm going to give it a really, really close battle. I'm going to give the Huskies a 24-23 lead, but I hope it's flipped, and I wouldn't be shocked one way or another. Brody, finish us off.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about this. I've been listening to a lot of what UConn fans have to say. Those guys do not like us. They think that we're arrogant. They think that we're entitled. They think that we're brutish and violent people. But I'm wearing my Norman Coleman jersey today. Yeah, I have the Yankee Conference patch on because I think that's how this game is going to go. I think no matter what UConn does throughout their entire sports history, they might be on a good streak right now, but they've never, ever been good against Delaware. They've never, ever been good against us. You look at the record, 20-7, dating back to 1951. We played almost annually for 20 years, and they still couldn't get a winning record. They would have to win every year. They'd have to play us every year and win every year until 2040 almost to even get a winning record on the Hens. So even if they win this week, which they won't do, Delaware is still the better program. They might have a couple successful seasons, but they've had a 20-year head start. And this is still how they look as a program. I'm not buying it. This is my headgear selection. As everyone knows who watches these, I have a UConn helmet over here and a Delaware helmet over here. I designed them all. I put them all together before the season started, all for this right here. This is my headgear selection. And I mean, I'm already wearing the jersey, so I might as well put on the helmet too. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, because these always are. They're always high-scoring games in the Cardi offense. Give me 44-38 Delaware. High-scoring game, but there's going to be turnovers. I like Delaware's chance to win at home. And even if they lose, like I said, Delaware is always going to be a better program than UConn. And in 20 years, we'll have more winning seasons than they've had in 40 years. And you can book that. So that's my selection.
Brody, our history guy, when thinking of the Blue Hens, Well, I hope you both are right. It's going to be a close battle, and I'm excited to see the Huskies and the Hens in action. And for those with us for the first time or with us for another week, thanks for listening, and go Hens.